Okay, we talked about Woodrow Wilson and America's entrance into World War I. We gave you a profile on President Wilson. We said he was born on December 29, 1856 in Virginia, but he grew up in Georgia during the Reconstruction. We told you that Wilson's father was a minister, so he grew up on a daily diet of prayer and Bible readings. We told you that during the Civil War, Wilson's father supported the South and even set up a church as a hospital for wounded Confederate soldiers. We told you that Wilson did not start school until he was 9 years old because of the Civil War, but his father taught him at home. After his formative education, he went on to attend Princeton University, where he graduated in 1879, then enrolled in graduate school at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. It was at this time that Wilson dropped his first name, which was Thomas, and simply went by the name Woodrow Wilson. At Johns Hopkins University, he studied history and political science, wrote his first book in 1885, which was entitled Congressional Government, a Study in American Politics. After he graduated from Johns Hopkins University, he returned to Princeton University as a college professor, and because of his success as a professor in 1902, he was named president of Princeton University. During his time serving as president of Princeton, he found difficulty getting along with the dean of students, a guy by the name of Andrew West. They were disagreeing on whether there should be a graduate program added to the university or not. Wilson thought there should be a graduate program. West opposed the program. Unfortunately for Wilson, West had the ear of a very wealthy alumni who stated that when he died, he would only will Princeton University a large sum of money if Wilson resigned. And so Wilson, thinking that was in the best interest of the college, resigned, and West was hired as his successor. Well, he didn't have much, he did have pretty good success after that. He entered politics after his run in education. He was successfully elected governor of New Jersey. His success in that position led to his election as President of the United States. He was the third Democratic president since the Civil War. He assumed the presidency with very few strings attached, but soon after he took over the presidency, we found the world was at war. We talked about Europe entering into a world war. We said that Europe had not experienced a major war since 1815, so they were horrified in the summer of 1914 when 5 major European countries went to war. The big concern was technology and the enhanced ability of one human being to kill another. Some examples we gave you that would be poison gases, submarines, tanks, airplanes, machine guns, and long-range artillery. We talked about the most dramatic weapon used in World War I would be the machine gun, something they had not seen before. We talked about trench warfare and how it was used in most of the early part of the war. We talked about the use of the airplane and even having machine guns mounted on the airplanes, along with dropping bombs. They used the machine guns, but as we mentioned, they were not synchronized, which resulted in a lot of self-inflicted problems when they shot off their own propeller. Then we talked about European alliances and the spark that set off World War I. We said that in June of 1914, the major powers in Europe arranged themselves in competing alliances. The Triple Alliance consisted of Germany and Austria-Hungary, and the Triple Entente consisted of France, Great Britain, and Russia. And the danger of alliances was pretty evident. If one country got into a conflict, all the other countries would then become involved, and the chances of a major war enhanced because of the formation of these alliances. Now, we said that World War I actually began as a result of one specific incident. On June 28th of 1914, the Archduke of Bosnia, Franz Ferdinand, and his wife were riding through the streets of Sarajevo in an open automobile. Sarajevo was the capital city of Bosnia, which was a province of Austria-Hungary, and a 19-year-old man by the name of Gavrilo Princip rushed towards the car and fired a revolver, killing both the Archduke and his wife. Since Princip was from the country of Serbia, which was under Austrian rule, most people in Serbia believed that their country should be free of Austrian rule, and this assassination by a Serb is going to lead to an ultimatum that could not be agreed upon. The ultimatum to Serbia basically came from the Austrian government, who asked the citizens of Serbia to be stripped totally of all their individual freedoms. And Austrian officials knew that Serbia would never agree to such a harsh ultimatum, and the Austrian government was backed by Germany and their leader Kaiser Wilhelm II. So when Serbia refused the ultimatum, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Well, now you've got the alliances kicking in. Russia of the Triple Entente backed Serbia and declared war on Germany. France of the Triple Entente also declared war on Germany. Germany then declared war on Russia and later, 2 days later, on France. And then, from this point on, Austria, Hungary, Germany, and their allies would be referred to as the Central Powers. Well, we stated that the Central Powers expected a swift and total victory. Their strategy was to march rapidly west into France and defeat France there, then swing back east and defeat Russia. The shortest route to France was through the country of Belgium, which was a neutral country. Germany actually requested permission from King Albert of Belgium to move troops to his country. They even offered him payment for any damages that resulted in their march. He refused, saying Belgium is a country, not a road. On August 3rd, 1914, despite King Albert's objection, German forces invaded Belgium. And as a result of that, what did Great Britain do the next day on August 4th? Because they were loyal to Belgium, they declared war on Germany. Well, within weeks, Turkey joined the Central Powers. Japan united with Great Britain, France, and Russia. And this alliance between Japan, Great Britain, France, and Russia became known as the Allies. Turkey, Austria, Hungary, and Germany became known as the Central Powers, right? Okay, we talked about American neutrality. We said that President Wilson considered Germany a lawless nation, and he also favored the Allies during the conflict, although publicly he was a little concerned, privately he was a little concerned. Privately he believed the Allies could win without the support of the United States. He adopted a policy of former neutrality, which split the opinions of the American people. We got to remember that America is a nation of immigrants, so you had different feelings on each side. We mentioned that obviously Americans whose ancestors came from Great Britain supported the Allies. Those that came from Germany supported the Central Powers. Those from Austria-Hungary supported the Central Powers. Blah, 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 blah. The two things that we told you of interest is that Irish Americans favored the German cause, not because they had a great love for Germany, but because they hated Great Britain so bad, because they were at odds with Great Britain. And this was the one that kind of was the kicker. Ironically, American Jews who were totally tortured, exterminated, killed, etc. by the Germans in World War II actually sympathized with Germany because they hated Russia, and American Jews supported Germany in World War I. Okay, then we start with our lecture today, the controversy surrounding the submarine warfare in World War I. Okay, so the first country to ever use the submarine in battle was Germany. And the submarine had a nickname, it was called a U-boat. A U-boat. So Germany becomes the first country to use the submarine, better known as a U-boat. Now what happened, which meant a controversy, is that Germany was using their submarines to attack Allied ships. They were using their submarines to attack Allied ships. They were violating international law at the time. So Germany was using their submarines to attack Allied ships, which caused controversy because it was a violation of international law. Because the international law at this time in history stated that you had to give a ship warning before you attacked it. Okay, the Germans obviously were not doing that. So the controversy behind German U-boats is they were sinking Allied ships without giving them warning before attacking. And that was the international law at the time. Now, what would be the reasoning behind that international law? Matty, why would you warn a ship before you attack? Because what are you looking for? Why are you sinking the ship? And probably what's on it would be things that might help your enemy, right? So the purpose behind sinking the Allied vessel isn't to kill the crew as much as it is to damage whatever supplies were going over to help your enemy. So the reason the international law was in place, and the reason why you had to give warning before you sank a vehicle, is you wanted to give that ship's crew a chance to escape and be safe before the ship blew up and ruined all the supplies that you didn't want to get to your enemy.
Not submarines.
Well, it was that, yeah. And really, when you think about it, they weren't after loss of life, they were after the supplies, and that's why they did it. Now, German U-boats, remember, these are submarines used for the first time, so this international law wasn't really talking about submarines, and really it was talking about other ships, firing upon other ships, right? So when the submarine came in, it was a weird deal, because why wouldn't the German U-boats be interested in giving a warning before they shot the vessel down? Very good, they had to surface. And when they surface, they become a sitting duck. How are you going to tell them you're going to sink them unless you surface? So that's why German U-boats refused to issue this warning, because they would be forced to surface to give such a warning, which left them vulnerable to being attacked themselves. Because can you see the submarine when it's under the water at this point in history? No. So what might you do, Caitlin, to get yourself off the hook? Kind of circumvent the policy. People do it all the time. What might you do to try to follow international law, but not to the point where it's going to damage your ship? What might you do? Close. What they did is they gave an international warning. They just made it public. Hey, we're going to shoot your ship down. Okay? So you better just be prepared. So instead of issuing a warning prior to each engagement, the Germans gave an international warning, simply issuing a statement that said that any ship that entered the war zone around Great Britain would be attacked, because these Allied ships are going to Great Britain, for example, to give them supplies to help them in the war effort. So they just made a general statement. If any of you ships get in this area around Great Britain that we consider the war zone, we are going to sink you. So the warning is, stay out of the war zone or you will be attacked. Well, that doesn't work very good, because we can't get in the war zone, we can't bring anything to Great Britain. Does that see what I mean? So it didn't go over real well, okay? Now, who's also trading with Great Britain that's not in the war yet? The United States. So President Wilson can't stand for this international warning, because it's going to cut off trade between the United States and Great Britain. We're trading with them before the war. We don't want to quit trading with them. But yet the Germans don't want us sending things that will benefit Great Britain, whether they're military supplies or regular things we send them. They don't want them to have that. So Wilson felt that this German international warning was unacceptable. It would cut off trade between the United States and Great Britain. And that was going to be okay until what? When German submarines attacked American ships and American lives were lost, then it's going to be an issue. So Wilson kind of stayed out of it until American lives were lost. I'm going to give you two examples of where Americans were killed by German submarines in the war zone off of Great Britain. The first one occurred on March 28, 1950. March 28, 1950. And what happened on March 28 of 1915 is a German submarine sank a British passenger liner called the Thalaba. On March 28, 1915, a German submarine sank a British passenger liner called the Thalaba. And one American was killed on that ship. So the first American loses its life in this U-boat controversy around Great Britain. March 28, 1915, a German submarine sank a British liner called the Thalaba, and one American was killed. Less than 2 months later, on May 7th, another British passenger ship was sunk by a German U-boat, and you might have heard of this one, the Lusitania. The Lusitania was sunk on May 7th, 1915 by a German U-boat. Problem with that is 124 Americans lost their lives in that attack. So May 7th, 1915, a British passenger liner by the name of the Lusitania was bombed and sunk by a German U-boat, killed 124 Americans. Now Germany's got to justify shooting out at these passenger liners. Why in the world would Germany shoot at these 2 passenger liners, Kristen? Why would they shoot at these 2 that carry passengers?
Because it may have supplies on it or intelligence.
And what do they call that? What do the Germans call that supplies they think is on there that's going to help Britain's war costs? They call that contraband. And so what Germany did is they justified the sinking of those 2 passenger liners by saying that they had contraband on those. And contraband are war materials that are supplied to a warring nation by a neutral nation. It wouldn't be contraband if the 2 places where 2 countries are fighting each other, would it? Because that's part of war. But when a neutral country gives aid to a warring country, that aid is known as contraband. And the Germans justified the sinking of these 2 passenger liners because they believed that they were carrying contraband. War materials that would be supplied to a warring nation by a neutral nation. Well, Wilson is very upset after the sinking of the Lusitania. He warns Germany to halt their actions, and he further warns Germany that another incident of violence against Americans at sea would not be tolerated by the United States. Did the Germans listen to him? They actually did for 2 years. Why did the Germans listen to Wilson's ultimatum? Why did they quit bombing and sinking these ships? No. Why did Germany quit? Because what didn't they want? What are we going to do if they keep doing this? They didn't want Americans to come into the war because Germany believed without doubt they would win without America. And they were right, actually. So for the next 2 years, Germany used submarine warfare only sparingly because they did not want to provoke the United States into entering World War I on the side of the Allies. So they quit because they thought they would be confident of victory, and they were right, they would have. Now, that does take us to another presidential election. And keep in mind that this presidential election happens prior to America getting involved in World War I. So what's going to be the campaign issue? War or no war. Okay? So this election is going to go by the virtue of how the American people feel about American neutrality versus Americans entering World War I. Now, as this election approached, the nation seemed to favor peace at this time. It was pretty evident that most of the people in the United States would rather not go to war in Europe. Most favored peace. Now, the Democrats nominated President Wilson for re-election, and they pushed the president as the candidate for peace. In other words, you elect Woodrow Wilson, you'll continue to have peace. You'll continue to have American neutrality. America will continue to stay out of World War I. That was the thought process by the Democrats. The Republican Party nominated a fellow by the name of Charles Evans Hughes for the presidency. Republicans nominated Charles Evans Hughes. And of course, the Democratic Party labeled him as what? The war candidate. Very good. So the Democratic Party campaigned hard that this Republican candidate, Charles Evans Hughes, would be the war candidate. If you vote for him, you'll be at war. Okay? Now, I don't know if that's necessarily the way Charles Evans Hughes believed, but that's what the Democrats pushed. Well, normally, when an incumbent president who's had pretty good success, like Wilson has, runs for re-election, it's usually not a very close election. Surprisingly, this one was very close. Now, what returns come in first in a presidential election? What section of the country? East and North. Okay? And when the results or the returns in the northern and eastern sections of the country came in, President Wilson was trailing by a large margin. In other words, Hughes was getting the majority of the vote in the north and in the east. So what's left is the South and the West. And Charles Evans Hughes actually went to bed on election night believing that he would be the next president of the United States. That's how much the polls were favoring him after the northern and eastern returns came in. Evans Hughes actually went to bed on election eve believing he would be the next president of the United States. Well, when the returns from the West and South came in, they heavily favored President Wilson. And as a result of that, Wilson wins his re-election campaign by a small margin. So when the results came in from the West and the South, nearly all favored President Wilson, and as a result, he is re-elected in the election of 1916. So President Wilson's victory gave Americans their desire for peace. Unfortunately, that peace did not last very long. So shortly after the election, we were in war anyway. So that takes us to our next subtopic then, which is the United States declares war and raises an army. Well, what continues really? Even though we're trying to stay neutral, what continues for the United States? Our stress with who? Germany. The stress is just getting too bad. And we were trying like crazy to stay out of this thing. But finally on April 6th of 1917, shortly after Wilson starts his second term, the United States officially declares war on Germany. This can't take